Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's SMECast, this month's event as part of our new Learning Tree project management community. Before we get started, I want to briefly introduce you to our project management community and the features available to you as an exclusive member. Everything you need to get the most out of your experience is available to you now in your private My Learning Tree account. So be sure to log in to learningtree.com, go to your My Learning Tree account, and from there you'll be able to access all of your benefits via the My Memberships tab. From there, you can register for our upcoming members-only events, join our LinkedIn community group for tips, reminders, and access to Learning Tree's project management and agile experts, who are all real-world practitioner instructor coaches, just like Rick, who we have with us today. And you can also browse our collection of curated on-demand microlearning resources that will help you hone your skills in project management and agile, and also help you earn PDUs to keep your certifications current. Today's topic is Federal Oversight in the Time of Agile, presented by Rick Melendez. For the next 45 minutes, we're going to explore the issues and benefits of adopting Agile for managing federal and state projects while still meeting the strict government requirements in the oversight of IT projects. Today's event is taking place in the Learning Tree Anywhere environment. If you've ever participated in a Learning Tree class online, you'll recognize this platform layout. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see Rick, our presenter. Below Rick is the chat box. This is where you can participate with questions or comments. So as you think of any questions that you have here for Rick, be sure to type them in the chat box. We'll be monitoring that and we'll relay your questions at the end of the discussion. Now that's all from my spiel here at the very beginning. It's now my privilege to introduce you to our subject matter expert of the day, Rick Melendez. Rick, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about our topic for the day and yourself, we'll go ahead and get started.
Very good. Thank you, Jen. And good morning, everybody. My name is Rick Melendez. I actually go by Rick, Ricardo Melendez, but I actually go by Rick. My wife is really the only one who calls me Ricardo, and she normally does that when she's mad at me anyway. But I'm going to take you back, in time. And it's not even going to be that far. Think back to March 13th, 2020. I don't know if many of you remember what that monumental day was, but in essence, that was the day that President Trump declared a public health emergency because of COVID. And we really do know what really happened right after that. In essence, the world changed, right? Within a few days, it just appeared that everything that we knew from the past had totally gone the opposite way. Everything from domestic and international air travel through the stock market, went up and down, and it really crashed for a few weeks and even a couple of months. Obviously, we know that Zoom became, the platform for everybody to do work on. And let's not even, discuss the fact that most of us, or many of us, started working out of the house and sharing the office with our spouse and the kids and the dog and the cat and the fish and everybody. And it just became, the norm. And probably the thing that really was more descriptive of those days was, how toilet paper really became more valuable than maybe even Bitcoins, or maybe it was the other way around. Really, the reality is that I actually don't remember which came first, if it was the run for the toilet paper or if it was the run for the Bitcoins. The reality is that I don't remember. But again, let me get back on track. Again, we all started forced to do telework, many of us. And obviously the face mask either became a fashion statement or maybe became a sign of revolution or evolution, whichever way you want to see it. But I do have to admit that, even though telework was, in essence, forced on many of us. There were some of us that actually, already knew that something like that was coming, or at least in my case, I had already been previously approved for full-time telework. So I was already working out of the house. And as a matter of fact, I was officially supposed to start my telework on March 15th. Well, on March 15th, the federal government decided that every civilian worker was going to be working out of the house. So, I didn't feel any special anymore. But again, I guess the point that I'm trying to make is, and this is obviously a long introduction, but I'm trying to make the point that life, we all know, can be pretty unpredictable. And we just don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next, whether it's in our private lives, whether it's in our work, business, you know, education, whatever the case is. We just don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring. And that's just as important in whatever industry that you're in, whether you're, in the Department of Defense, or whether you're in the private sector, or obviously the federal government, any of the agencies in the federal government. We had to adjust to what the pandemic brought, and we're still adjusting because, again, the world's unpredictable. Now, I'm going to say this presentation is not necessarily about Agile. There's way too many good books, way too many good speakers, way too many other good presentations on Agile and what Agile is all about. This is obviously about how we in the federal government, we, the feds, obviously a term of endearment, how we are coping with change and how we are coping with the new way of thinking and the new way of doing work. The reality is that, just like anybody else, when the pandemic hit, I did a lot of video binge watching, I guess you can say. And, one of the movies that I actually watched was Love in the Time of Cholera, with, the one actor, Javier Bardem, I think it was. But basically, it was a good movie, but I remember actually reading the book back in high school. And when I watched the movie this time, it was like, okay, I was trying to attach it or connect it to the times that we were living in, and maybe thinking about, work in the time of cholera or the time of COVID, I should say. And so I was trying to make a connection, and so what I did is I actually downloaded Love in the Time of Cholera, but I downloaded the Spanish version. And let me tell you, the Spanish version is actually a lot better, especially when you hear it on Audible, because you can actually feel the, I guess the anguish and the romance and everything else that goes with it. And as I started working and I started thinking about how can we make our work more efficient in the federal government, it really dawned on me that, we have to find a way to become more efficient, become better at what we do, become really more agile. And so we know that Agile has taken off, and it is, for a lack of better words, the buzzword right now. It's the buzz technology that everybody wants to get into. But we know also how the federal work and the federal government can be. We're certainly structured, we're set in our ways, and it does take a long time for us to change. So here we are. We're going to go ahead and go over a presentation just to give you a small taste of what the federal oversight can be if we start thinking in an agile mindset. So again, just a little bit about myself. I'm obviously a federal worker. I do work for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, where I'm a program and project manager. And in essence, I'm overseeing 4 states in the union, and my job is really to be sort of the federal oversight and federal project manager or program manager for those states and for every IT project that they have going on, implementing different systems, everything from their eligibility and enrollment systems to their claims processing systems for the Medicaid program, through obviously anything dealing with the providers and with pharmacy and fraud and abuse. So it's several different systems that I'm responsible for overseeing. And in that role, I essentially review the different plans that the states are trying to develop and also trying to use to implement those systems. And I also approve those plans, and also I'm responsible for recommending approval of the federal funding that goes with those projects. The federal funding can be pretty significant, for especially for the on the Medicaid side. Most of those projects can be obviously pretty pricey, in the millions and millions of dollars. And the federal government is responsible for 90% of the funding in those projects when we're implementing, and 75% once the project is deployed and is in maintenance and operations. So it is a significant investment for the federal government and for the United States. And so we want to make sure that we are doing the best for, for the Medicaid program, and also that we are being proper stewards of the federal dollars. I'm also a United States Air Force veteran. I actually retired in 2009. I spent 21 years in the Air Force. Most of my career was in the civil engineering career field, doing different types of jobs within civil engineering, everything from HVAC all the way through engineering, drafting, construction management, contract management. I did some GIS, which is Geographical Information Systems, and so I learned quite a bit about not only the management of contracts, but the management of projects, and also the procurement process too. I'm also a small business owner. My company is called RAM PM, and in essence, RAM is just really my first name and the last name of or the first name of my wife, Myrna. We just do a little bit of PM consulting on the side, and obviously I do work on the side for Learning Tree International. I guess you can say, that I'm an Agilist at heart, and I know that that's again one of those overused titles or statements or terms, but I truly do embrace Agile. I think, for me, my eyes opened up really a long time ago in 2008, the first time that I was part of an Agile project. And I saw the benefits of it. I saw the flexibility that it provided to the organization, and the results that it was providing, not only in a more frequent manner, but also with a lower overhead cost, and also with a lower risk factor. So I know that there's a lot of benefits if it is implemented the right way, though. And obviously, when I'm talking about Agile, I'm not just talking about one methodology or one framework or one set of rules. I'm really talking about different things. And we'll go a little bit over that. Again, this is not an Agile class or an Agile course or an Agile discussion. It's more just to give you a little perspective on how we can better use Agile in the federal background. Again, I've been with Learning Tree for a little bit over 2 years now, and actually they hired me to teach project management fundamental classes. But in reality, I've been teaching quite a lot of Agile classes. Probably out of the 20 or so classes that I taught, I probably taught 6 or 8 classes that are in Agile. And the fun thing about that is that I have actually taught a couple of Agile classes in Spanish to a group of city workers for the Mexico and Latin America region. And on the side too, I also teach the FAC PPM classes, which is the Federal Acquisition Certification Project and Program Management classes that are required by those roles in the federal government to manage those type of projects. I've graduated from the University of Phoenix, and I actually taught there for about 6 years. Back in the mid 2010s. And at some point, I also taught at the U.S. Air Force Academy during my Air Force career, where I taught the cadets and not only military training, but also I did some Spanish. Actually, I got the privilege to teach them Spanish, and I also did work for a research center that they had in there where they were researching geospatial type of technologies. And in essence, that's where I actually got involved with Agile for the first time. So again, let's talk about Agile. And we know that Agile is, we can keep saying that it's probably the buzzword and the latest trend, and everybody wants to be Agile. You see a lot of different ads of companies that are advertising their Agile prowess, and saying that we are Agile, we think Agile, or we do Agile, whatever the case is. But the reality is that, Agile is something that, we can certainly say that Agile is not something that is totally brand new. The reality that Agile has been around, and, when I'm talking about Agile, I'm talking about different methodologies or ways of thinking, ways of doing work. Some of the earlier, iterations of Agile, you can say, came about even in the 1930s, 1940s with the different, inventory type of uh, approaches, not only that were being done in the United States in the supermarkets, but also even in the Toyota production system. So, those were the earlier lean and type of Agile, type of iterative, type of, learning from your mistakes mentality that started happening. Eventually, some of those approaches evolved into the 1980s. There were other type of approaches that came out. There was a spiral type of incremental, iterative type of approach that was actually used by the United States government too back in the mid 1980s. And it was kind of like an earlier version of really sprints and Scrum and all of those incremental type of deliveries models. In the 1990s, obviously there were other big events that happened. The extreme programming was born, and Scrum was born, and really those two are some of the most popular. You can say agile methodologies that are available right now and that are being used by many organizations and many teams. And from those is really a lot of the principles and values that are part of the overall agile definition that are, really being used and really borrowed, I guess you can say. Fast forward really to 2021, excuse me, 2001. In 2001 is truly when we can say that the revolution happened. And again, I like to say revolution, but in essence, it was more an evolution because, as I mentioned before, some of those methodologies, some of those models were really a lot of them had already been in action for quite a while. And in essence, there were different groups of people that were already using some of those ideas. But what happened in 2001, there was a group of developers, and again, I'm not really, going back over history and really giving you a thorough rehash of history. There's other sources that you can actually read and read a little more about the Agile Manifesto and about how Agile came about. But in essence, a group of the most creative, innovative developers, software developers, got together in Park City, Utah. It was somewhere around February, mid-February. I think it was February 17th, 2001. And they got together with the idea to discuss better ways of developing software. The genesis for that meeting, really, or those meetings, was that they were frustrated with the way software development was being processed and it was being performed. The reality is that software development was a pretty bad business back in those days. In essence, you could say that 9 out of 10 software project would end up in failure. And that was mainly a combination of schedule delays, project budget overruns, or just straight up failures, a lack of understanding of the requirements, a lack of understanding of what the ultimate need was. And so if you were around in those days and you bought any software, I mean, it was a really, it was a like playing a roulette game. I remember buying software that, I would put it into my old computer, and it would run for it. First of all, it would take like 5 minutes, 10 minutes for it to even get to the home page. And by the time that it would get there, it would crash within a few minutes, or it would slow down the whole computer. It would something would happen. So it was a horrible experience. And so this experts, really the creative force behind software development in those days, they decided that they wanted to come up with something a little bit better. And so through the conversations that they had throughout that whole week, and I guess in between the ski runs, and probably the wild nights that they were having, they came up with some ideas on how to better make a model that could improve how we develop software effectively. And out of that model, basically, the Agile Manifesto was born. We obviously know that the manifesto is composed of values, different values, and also different principles. And again, I'm not going to go over those. This is not, a discussion on that. But in essence, what they saw with the manifesto is they saw better ways of not only providing value to the customer at an earlier stage, but also of doing that on a consistent basis. And on top of that, they saw that there's value in also failure, because by understanding failure, they can better improve their processes. So they attach a large value to the ability to learn from your mistakes. And those are some of the really some of the I guess you can say the failure points in the approach that was being used before. Obviously we probably have heard of waterfall, which is the old predictive type of approach where planning would be done for the first few months of the project. Everything would be planned, everything would be thought of, every little risk would be lined up and documented. And then we would go do the actual development and eventually the actual testing of the product. And then we would find out that everything that we planned for, the requirements that we analyzed, were totally wrong. This is not really what the customer, what the consumer, what the client wanted, what the user wanted. So there was a lot of disconnect that needed to be fixed. Uh, and I think that was the main idea behind the manifesto, that we could actually see that, we could actually talk to the consumers, the users at an earlier stage. We can fix problems. We can give them what they want earlier, often, and better. And really, in a sense, cheaper, you can say. Unfortunately, in the federal government, we can actually say that, you know, change comes slow. And that's no lie. And that's really not something that is not a secret. The reality is that in the federal government, we wait until 2020 to implement Windows 2010 because we want to make sure that everything is fine. We're risk adverse, I guess you can say. And so we want to make sure that everything has been checked off, that we don't have any problems, that we're not going to affect critical systems. And that, we're willing to wait until everybody has tested the software until it's ready to go. It's the same with any new approach, especially in the case of software development. We're still finally catching up to it. But again, in essence, Agile exploded maybe 12, 13 years ago. Agile has really finally become a central idea in software development in the federal government, probably just in the last 4 or 5 years at the most. And it's just because we wanted to make sure that we understood this. But there's still a lot of growing pain. There's still a lot of issues with the way that we can marry agile software development with the oversight, the required oversight that we have to have. And in essence, that is what the purpose of this presentation is. It's understanding, number one, the federal oversight of IT projects and how we, we are performing that, and also how we could make it more efficient by applying an agile approach to it. The one thing that I do want to say, and this is more a disclaimer than anything else, is that this presentation is not focusing on every framework, every approach, every manual or guidance in the federal government for every agency. There's just not enough time for me to present that. Rather, I'm going to concentrate on the health and human services arena, as well as the social services arena, because I do have extensive experience in those areas. And also, I want to make sure that we understand that the process that I'm going to present is unique to just certain federal departments and agencies, and that is not something that is used in many of the other agencies. And it's because of the unique mission that those agencies provide to the American people. So we want to make sure, I want to make sure that this is understood, that I'm not really discussing all of the different frameworks. I just concentrated on this one framework. And this framework is called the Advanced Planning Document process, or the APD process. And as you notice, we don't have a D after advance, and that's by design, because really this is a type of process that is looking forward. It's not looking back, so we don't want to really make it into the past tense. And this is actually used by federal departments, as I mentioned before, and obviously they're subordinate agencies. Those departments include the Health and Human Services, and that also includes the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which is the agency that I work for. In HHS, we also have the Administration for Children and Families, ACF, which obviously provide different services and different programs, including child welfare, child support enforcement, and other type of family and child services that are available to the American public. And finally, the United States Department of Agriculture, it's actually the Food and Nutrition Service Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, which is something that we formerly used to call it food stamps. And, I'm sure many Americans still refer to it as food stamps. But in essence, that name was actually changed back in 2008 to SNAP. And finally, the Women, Infant, and Children's Program, which is another nutritional program mainly focused on pregnant women, their infant and babies population. And so those are the agencies that actually use the APD process. I'm going to go a little bit more about how that process is used to provide the oversight that we require for the IT programming. In essence, how we can use it and tie it to the Agile process at some point. So again, a little bit more about the federal APD process. And you know what, when I was creating the slides and I actually created a talking paper. I called the federal APD the cat's meow of the federal oversight world. And I know it's kind of like a twerky type of way of saying it, but really the APD process, and the APD in particular, is something that is it's very unique, number one, to those agencies, and number two, it's something that is a lot of people have a hard time misunderstanding or not understanding properly, and there's always a high demand for knowledge on the APD process. And I can tell you that, and I can test, that I'm always getting different job offers on LinkedIn or other places, just because I'm pretty knowledgeable of the APD process. There's a lot of information and there's a lot of regulation and knowledge that needs to be understood to properly apply the APD process for the oversight of projects. We'll go a little bit more of really the purpose of those in the next few slides. But again, what we do with the APD processes and the feds, what we do is we actually use it to manage, again, the oversight of the projects, not only from the time that the project is being conceptualized to the point that we start planning and then eventually developing and at some point implementing and deploying those systems. And the way that we use those documents is really the states are required to develop those documents, and they'll be based on the actual cycle or the actual phase that they are within the cycle. So as it's mentioned over here, the APD process is really tied to a rhythmic approach. So in essence, we are asking for planning APDs or the advanced planning documents anytime that a state is in the planning activities, when they're doing their feasibility study, they're doing their cost benefit analysis or any other type of analysis or study to back up their business case. Through that, they in essence can attest and they can basically validate the need for a project, and they can receive the federal funding from us. So we'll review those documents, we'll provide the states feedback, and then we'll review their budget and we'll provide them feedback on that if necessary. Otherwise, we'll recommend approval, and once they're approved, they can, in essence, start moving into the actual planning of the solution, the new system, the product that they're trying to implement. Once they get into that point, they can go ahead and move into what is called an implementation APD. Again, just like the name implies, this is at that point we're trying to develop the product, and at some point we're going to go ahead and implement that product, that solution. And finally, once the solution is implemented, the system is deployed, the system is operational, and regular maintenance is going on, then they would move to an operational APD. For every one of those phases, we, the feds, the analysts, are doing reviews with the states and on the documents, and we're providing feedback. We're giving them direction, we're giving them guidance, and at some point we do recommend the approval for each of those phases. Again, let's keep in mind these systems are extremely expensive. I mean, a typical eligibility and enrollment system in the Medicaid realm it can be $60 to $100 million. That's just for the planning and implementation of that system. Once it gets deployed and it becomes operational, the cost can be 4 times that, 5 times that, depending on the system, depending on the state, depending on the amount of participants that are being managed through the different systems. So there's a lot of oversight that we need to provide for those type of endeavors. Again, we are using the APD, and the reason why it is needed is because the APD is something that is not only rooted in the statute, but also it's stuff that it's documents, it's processes that we have used for many years. The Medicaid program was actually born in 1965 as a result of the Social Security Act, which obviously, it was the establishment of Social Security. Well, as part of that, Medicaid was given also a line item in the budget, and one of those line items was for the states to implement basically IT systems, or systems they called them at that time, for them to automate some of the functions and to make sure that the Medicaid program is properly administered. The APD process came shortly thereafter. It was created, in essence, in the late 60s, early 70s, and it's been around for quite a while. The problem with the APD process, as you could probably see, is that it's a structured process. It's slow, it's archaic, and it's because it's rooted in regulations and stature. It's very difficult to change it. However, there are benefits to it because through the APD process, we are ensuring that the states continue to have that funding that they require. So we're not really shutting off the funding, and they can go ahead and continue with that. It also works well with projects where change is minimal. So there's minimal change from month to month. So in essence, what we're talking about those waterfall or predictive projects, which, waterfall I saw on another presentation the other day, and I wasn't aware. Waterfall has been around for about 50 years, being born around 1970. There was, some researchers that came up with it. I thought that it was actually before that it was something that was created in the Department of Defense back in the 1950s, but it was actually born in the 1970s. So it's relatively old, by by regular standards, but in essence, it hasn't really been around that long. But again, the APD process is better used or better suited for those type of projects just because of the structure way that each of those are being handled. Again, the approach, the way that it works, each of the agencies that I described before, that I mentioned before, they do have their own regulations that are applicable to the APD process, and they all have their own cadence, cyclic cadence that they follow. But in essence, the bottom line is that those APDs are submitted. Number one, they're submitted when they're at the initial point, when the project is being is being funded and is being requested, and then on an annual basis thereafter. There's other, if there's unusual circumstances that happen, then we require the APDs, or we require the states to submit those APDs on an as needed basis. And we actually call those as needed APD updates. And unusual circumstances can be anything from a big project delay to a budget overrun, significant budget overrun, to a change in scope or a change in project approach, project methodology approach, anything that will change, in essence, the nature of the project from the original approval that was given. And in essence, those as needed situations and those as needed APDs have to be submitted to us within 60 days after those changes are known. So what that does is it allows the project to obviously remain eligible for the funding. And also it's the states need to understand that if they don't get that approval, that they may actually lose the funding, and really they're going to be the ones that are going to be responsible for paying the activities and for paying the cost of the project. So you can see how the APD really does become a vital cog in the federal oversight machinery. The problem again is that because this is an archaic, very structured process that is based on a known and estimated cyclical cadence, it really makes it very difficult to get up to date information. And so in essence, when we're talking about we're going to get a report every year. And basically the report, the APD update, is basically going to provide us information that happened on the project over the last year. And it's kind of like, well, a lot of things have happened over the last year, and we're just getting this right now. And then on top of that, if there's an unusual circumstance, again, a schedule overrun, a budget overrun, a change in scope, the state has 60 days to submit that document. A lot of things can happen in 60 days. So again, it's not very reactive. It's not a very reactive process, and it really does require a lot more oversight from the analysts and a lot more project involvement for them to really stay on top of it, because otherwise, really, you can lose track of the projects very easily. Again, I just mentioned some of that stuff. The APD process is truly a very rigid and structured set of procedures. And again, it is perfect for waterfalls. That's the bottom line, because waterfalls, again, we really do spend a lot of time planning and predicting and trying to guess what the future is going to look like. And so it really makes it ideal for a cyclical type of cadence where we receive those updates. That is unless the waterfall project is going bad. But even then, if it goes bad, then they still have 60 days before they submit that update. And again, a lot of information is lost in translation and lost in the time frame that we're asking the states to submit that. Also, if the APD process is not used properly, it could lead to definitely project failure, project cost overrun, a full disengagement of expectations from what the state requested to what the feds understood that they requested the funding for. And so, it can certainly lead to a lot of lost funding and a lot of lost opportunities, certainly. And obviously, because of that structure and rigid approach, it is difficult to marry to agile practices. Let's keep in mind agile practices. It's a difficult approach to implement, and that is because agile demands an all or nothing mentality. You cannot go bland on agile. If you're going to implement agile, your organization has to be all in other words. And it is very difficult for a lot of organizations to do that. I mean, a lot of organizations just don't like change. And that's especially true in state government and in, obviously, federal government, simply because of that idea that we're going to change and that we're going to introduce a lot more risk. And there's a possibility that we're going to end up losing more money and that, we're going to have to now answer to the taxpayers. So again, it's difficult to implement and difficult to marry the concepts together. But again, there are ways of doing this, and there are people that are already working on this different type of approaches. The one thing that we have to realize that, the feds love paperwork, which again goes in contrast with what the Agile Manifesto exclaims. And that's one of the values right here, that we in Agile prefer working software over comprehensive documentation. Well, the reality is that, when this manifesto came out, the first few years, there was a misunderstanding of that value because many people, many organizations, many developers took it like, oh, great, we don't require documentation anymore. We can just go ahead and code. We can just go ahead and do our work, and we can just go ahead and deploy the product, the solution. But in essence, the manifesto developers, the original group of 17 who met in February 2001 in City Park, they kind of foresaw that coming. And so they actually added a kind of like a get out of jail card or maybe a mulligan to that manifesto, where they actually said, basically it says something to the effect that they actually prefer the items on the left of the value more than they do on the ones on the right. But in essence, that necessarily means that those on the left, yeah, they're valuable. But those on the right, they also do bring some value. We're not discarding any of the other mindset. We still need some documentation. And so the reality is that Agile teams still require documentation. They require documentation that is just barely good enough to actually start working. And that is, in essence, means anything from, product backlogs through even the user stories, through any any lessons learned that are captured during the retrospective, anything basically that will allow them to not only start working soon, but also to really learn from their mistakes. And so they're still doing some documentation. They're still doing some of that same stuff. Again, the problem is with the feds is that we actually do require a lot more documentation. Some of the documentation that we require, it can be tremendous. It can be tremendous load on the project teams. It can certainly cause a lot of confusion. It causes a lot more work. And so that kind of goes against the mindset and also the value of the Agile Manifesto, that they're going to do just enough work basically to start working. So I guess the bottom line that I'm trying to say over here, that for us, the feds, the idea that we're only going to get minimal documentation is truly a foreign concept. But it's something that we need to start embracing, because this is the new world. We need to really find a balance with our states and with the people that we deal with, the contractors, and likewise, the states should also be working with the feds to try to understand what our needs are, to try to meet us in the middle. Because, documentation is something that's never going to go away, and it's not going to go away whether you're practicing Agile or whether you're in Waterfall or any other traditional approach. It's just the amount of documentation and really the type of vital documentation that we actually need to make valid decisions and recommendations and really adjust as needed for any complications that we see in other projects. Again, some of the things that I certainly recommended, I certainly have done in my projects, I'm really concentrating on eliminating waste and really knocking down the red tape that we need. So I have worked with some of my states to create ways of making the APD process more effective and really adding an agile approach to it, minimizing the documentation that we're getting, really ensuring that the information that the feds, that myself and my counterparts are getting is critical. It's critical information that's going to allow us to understand, the state project and the progress and any issues, any challenges that they may be seeing, so that we can certainly, react, but react proactively rather than react reactively. We also want to make sure that we have that constant communication with our project teams and that we have that transparency. And the transparency has to go both ways. It doesn't work only one way. But we want to make sure that they understand that, look, if we're concerned about something, here it is. And likewise, we want to make sure that we have that relationship with our project teams where if something's going wrong, if a sprint didn't really provide or produce the expected velocity or the expected story points that they thought they were going to produce, let's go ahead and do a root cause analysis. Let's try to understand. Let us know. And let us know how we can help out. There may be additional funding that you may be required, additional resources that we can bring your way, additional training, additional, whatever the case is. Again, we want to make sure that we get valid, relevant, and recent information so that we can make those decisions and we can make them right away. Again, that's just one of those concepts, in Agile that really allows it. And we also want to make sure that we learn from our mistakes. Some of the common metrics that I actually ask my states to provide me is, your typical Agile and Sprint, Scrum, XP type of, information radiators, everything from burn up charts to burn down charts to obviously team velocity. And team velocity, not that I'm going to get in the weeds, but, it really does allow me to understand how the teams are coming in together. Are they a cohesive team? How effective are they? Likewise, sprint goals. Are they meeting their sprint goals every time? or are they failing and having to carry technical debt or whatever the case is to the next sprint? And so what is the deal? Tell me, and again, I'm not going to get in the weeds because I'm more at the program level, but at the same time, I'm going to go ahead and hopefully provide some feedback, provide uh, some resources that the state can use, and just work with them, help them become efficient, help them understand. Maybe there is a misunderstanding in how the process is supposed to be working. Well, let's get them some coaches. Let's get them maybe get another scrum master or whatever the case is. Let's work on getting better at it. And finally, the product backlogs. Obviously, I'm not the product owner, even though indirectly we are because of we're the largest financer. But at the same time, I'm not at the ground level. I'm not refining the backlogs or the product backlogs. I'm not the owner of the product backlogs, but I do, work with them and I do discuss with them, and not necessarily that I'm going to be giving them my priorities, but just to have an understanding of what they're seeing and what they need. Again, some other things that I would recommend is certainly attend team demonstrations, even if occasionally, because I know we're all busy. And like I said, I mentioned that I have quite a few projects. So for me, it's impossible to attend every project demonstration. The main thing is, always be a fly on the wall as an oversight. Don't go in and don't influence discussions, decisions that the team is doing, that the customer and the team, the users, in a sense, we're still providing oversight and we still want to hear and we still want to see that interaction, but we shouldn't really be the ones that are making those decisions for them. Now, maybe after the fact, we can go ahead and talk to the leadership and to the project team, whether it's the product owner or whomever, and just try to get a perspective on some of the communication that we're getting, or maybe give them our perspective on some of the communication. Again, we should also stay away from really going to any of the required team meetings. That just goes against the Scrum and XP rules. If we're not part of the team, we shouldn't be in those meetings. Again, that's private or that's team time. That's not our time. Keep working with them on understanding the cadence of the mandatory reports. If you have to change the cadence of those reports from an annual basis to maybe a quarterly basis, investigate that. Talk to your state. Ask them, what is the best way for them to provide you the information. Again, I'm working with my states. I'm actually getting quarterly APDs, and I'm seeing not only what they worked on before on the last 4 sprints, but also what they're working on the current 4 sprints, and also what they're going to be working on the next 4 sprints. So it gives me an idea. It gives me a better understanding of how the project is progressing, where they're going with their results and their efforts, and information like that is critical to make decisions. And again, we also want to continue working with the project teams to ensure that they have that flexibility, understanding of their own plans.
Okay, so I guess in essence, what we're trying to say is that obviously Agile has exploded over the last 10 plus years, and especially, how it has been really embraced by the private industry and by, developers everywhere, that are, enjoying seeing something or using something that actually gives them a better sense of control over the development efforts that they're doing. It really allows them to provide a value for the customer a lot easier and a lot faster and a lot sooner and really a lot more frequently. And so they see a lot of value in that. And again, even though the shift in this software development type of thinking took us by surprise in the government, we are finally starting to catch up. And I know that it is there are a lot of benefits, and we know that there are a lot of benefits, and we are attempting to do things and gain a better perspective of what Agile can do for our own projects and the oversight that we give to those projects. There's obviously different ways of doing this. Actually, there's an entity, there's an agency called the Technology Transformation Service, which is an agency of the General Schedule Administration, which is GSA basically. Uh, those guys are heavy into Agile, and it's not just that they're developing software for different agencies using Agile methodologies, but they're also going around teaching Agile to the different agencies and teaching them how they can become better at it, and not only on the development sense, but also on how they can apply Agile to their even to their own oversight efforts, and how they can marry those efforts to an Agile mindset. So there is some progress. The reality is that Agile is going to be here for a few years. We don't know how long this is going to be going. We don't know what the next big innovation or creative way of doing work is going to bring. I imagine that it's going to continue to evolve. And it's also going to continue to become a mainstream approach that is going to be embraced heavily in the federal government, and there's going to be a lot of good efforts that are going to result from it. I do believe in that. But again, just like anything else, we still don't know what we don't know, and there's more to come on this. So at this point, I certainly want to thank you for your time and your attention. Uh, if there are any questions or anything that you would like me to follow up with me, just go ahead and let us know. Put it on the send us a message, and we'll go ahead and definitely take care of it. Thank you everybody for your attention, and have a great day, great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for that, Rick. Really appreciate all of the insight and the great advice that you've covered here in this presentation. I want to remind everybody to log into their My Learning Tree accounts so that you can take advantage of all the benefits that are available to you. You'll be able to log into our LinkedIn membership group from there. You can connect with Rick on there. If you have any questions on this topic, we certainly recommend you post them in there so we can get a conversation going about it. And then once again, I'd just like to thank our guest here, Rick, for the lively conversation. And thanks to everyone who joined today's event. And we, of course, look forward to seeing you in future events and as part of our LinkedIn community. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you.